Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Splitting Smart, where we have candid and informative discussions with divorce and well-being professionals. I am Lila Aiken Ali, a divorcee, a divorce coach, and the founder of Split.fyi.
I'm Heather Steer, also a divorcee, a CDFA, divorce coach, and the other co-founder of Split.fyi. And today I'm very excited. We're going to be in discussion with Elaine Ellis, a financial advisor to many, including those who need to rebuild their lives from scratch after divorce. So Elaine supports her clients with investment, retirement, and insurance decisions, to name a few. And we're going to spend a little bit of time just learning about what financial advisors do.
And so we also realize that one of the biggest questions in our community and our clients is, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be financially okay, especially? And so we obviously thought it was really beneficial for you to get to know the financial analyst, financial advisor, like Elaine. So hello, Elaine. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good morning.
Super happy having you here.
I
know Elaine very well because she's advised me many times. And so I think that it's important for our audience to know a little bit about the financial advisor's role, especially what they provide as services and how they support people through their transitional phase, especially out of a marriage. I'll let you introduce yourself, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you again, ladies, for inviting me. Also a divorcee, so I'm part of the divorcee club. It seems as though now, even more so, that's a norm, right? Most people go through a divorce. So it's getting to a point, is this your first spouse, significant other, or your second one sometimes? So it is a question I always ask if there's a previous marriage. I'm from Silicon Valley, born and raised here in California, and I've been with this firm for 22 years now. So I've come across quite a few very interesting situations over the course of my career, and enjoy what I do. And it comes from a personal experience. Through my divorce, I got 2 children. And that's what I had to start with, right? And at the age of, my son turned 6 months old and my daughter was 5. So I had to figure it out quickly. How am I going to be able to do this? And that's where my journey started. And I figured if I could do it, grew my own business, purchased my own home, supported my kids 100%, 7 days out of the week, 24 hours, and everyone else can do it as well. So it's just getting grounded in a strategy.
Well, so let's spend a couple minutes talking about kind of the strategy, because I spend a lot of time in my certified divorce financial analyst role working with divorcees, and I am a huge fan of partnering with financial advisors for a lot of reasons, and that you and I have spoken about in previous conversations. I tend to be much more of the tactical with the divorce process, education piece, and you, I think, are much more of the strategist, which is what I love. I do not do long-term investment strategy. It's not a passion of mine. I do a lot of very detailed transition work, and I think it's fascinating that, you know, because those are 2 kind of different conversations, but they're very intertwined, and particularly in that question of, am I going to be okay? So I tend to try to bring someone in pretty early into the conversation. And one of the things I also want to touch upon is the idea that if you don't already have a financial advisor, you think you don't even qualify for a financial advisor, how do we get around that? So I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts maybe on that piece of things and the engagement. I mean, there's so much to cover in today's conversation. So, but I honor the work that you do in partnering with people throughout their lives and transitions. And so I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, thank you. So, you know, it's interesting. There are a lot of people, a lot of individuals believe that they don't have enough wealth, money, income to meet with a financial advisor.
Exactly.
In some situations, it is accurate where there's some advisors out there, mostly investment advisors, not financial advisors, who won't meet with a client unless they have 500,000 of assets to manage. Again, that's an investment advisor, but it is good to just meet with a financial advisor, even if you don't have that kind of wealth, just to get a plan in place that works specifically designed for them. Right.
Okay, so walk me through that nuance, because I think that was lost on a lot of people, particularly the ones that are the financial outspouse, that are the ones that may never have managed their, or dealt with a 401k or dealt with any sort of level of assets. I have a lot of clients in my private practice that's the case. They are the less educated about this. And I mean, honestly, I am a financially minded person, but in my own divorce, it took my parents actually coming to me and their financial plan or advisors having a panic attack and going, "What do you mean your daughter doesn't have anyone?" And I didn't have anyone. I'm not really sure why I didn't at this point, but I was naive about it. And a lot of our investments were in a pension plan. So I was like, you can't really manage that anyway. So whatever. I mean, which was not the right thing to do. In hindsight, I totally wish I would have been doing this at a much younger age, the work I'm doing now, for my own self. So I would love to understand that nuance and how do these people go find someone like this and questions and.
I believe your biggest approach to finding a financial advisor is through an introduction. It is taboo to talk about money, right? We don't want to know what. I think the fear is that people think they don't have enough wealth compared to their friends or their circle or their employees. The one thing I will always recommend is, even if they're introduced to me, go back and ask this person their experience, right? I also think it's really difficult for consumers to figure out what strategy they should be moving forward with. There's so much out there. There's TV, there's internet, there's books, there's iPods, there's TED TV telling you what you're supposed to do. And it really doesn't mean that situation pertains to each individual. So just starting from the beginning, what is it that they're currently doing? There's a lot of people who really don't even know where their money's going, right? Literally, and how could they? We have 401ks and bank accounts and credit cards and mortgages and auto loans and student loans. And you've got all these different things that just kind of come out of your checking account, not really clear what's going on. So getting them grounded first and foremost, through more of a multi-goal methodology, looking at both assets and liabilities, not just taking money and investing it in the stock market, right? That's not the best way to start. Step back, see where your money's going. I have everyone go on a tool that I have that actually aggregates all of their expenses, all of their credit connections into one vehicle. And it literally will show a person what they've spent over the past 12 months. And that really does produce some awareness. Like, they're not even aware they had 10 subscriptions, and it's only $9.99, right, a month. It's misleading. And then they also find out that they have a bunch of subscriptions on their credit cards that they didn't even know they subscribed. So they might have clicked something and boom, another $14 a month. So learning just how much they're spending is usually the start. And again, swipe, auto deduct, how do you keep track? Plus, we're too busy to look at all this stuff. And then the institutions made it very convenient that everything could just now get e-delivered. So you don't even open up your statements anymore. I don't, hardly ever do. So I always start with the awareness and then their situation, right? Getting a little bit of clarity on their background, their philosophy of money, and now taking approach. Okay, do you want to purchase a home? Do you want a strategy to get out of debt? Should you be maxing out your 401k, right? Just getting some of their feedback on, well, I was told I should do this. One example is a wonderful young man who is 26. 27% of his income was going towards his 401k. He didn't have enough money to live off of, so he had $20,000 of credit card debt and zero savings.
Yep,
And
not uncommon.
yeah,
And it starts at such a young age. You know, you're already, your mindset is doing that. I mean, we are very credit driven in this country, especially, right? And we're taught in a certain way that it's, you know, everything is accessible and everything is doable. And it is an interesting thing what you said. I just want to touch point on that, because it's like, what is your relationship with money? So, you know, when Heather and I are working with clients, or I myself, when I was going through the divorce, I was young, and, you know, you made money, you spent money, you made money, you spent money, you might've saved a little bit, but your mindset was completely different than when you have a family and you have children. And to her point earlier is that some of them, you know, we've been abdicating a lot of our finances to the other partner. So then we find ourselves in this situation where we are really kind of swimming out of waters because, oh my God, we didn't even know we needed to have all of those things. And the dispensable income is actually not there. And so how do you, and I know it's not your job to train people to think differently, but how do you highlight that in a way that they really can resonate with them, with like, you actually can't be spending this kind of money, and you've got to have to work towards not spending there, and rather let's focus on the things that you actually do need. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot of training in that sense, because I think people, especially in a transitional phase out of divorce, they feel, oh my God, I don't want to give up what I had. I don't want to give up my lifestyle. I had this, I should have this, I should always have that. So that's a whole nother, you know, conversation. And then it's, well, what are the things that you really, really need and are non-negotiables? And you need to understand that. And then if there's some extra, and if you're going to try to get there, then what are we going to do? What are the steps to get there? How are we going to get you there? You know, is it you finding a job in a couple of years? Is it this? Is it that? So walk us through a little bit of how you kind of help a client, without, of course, telling them you can't spend any, you know, you can't spend your money there, because of course you can't tell people what to do, but it's how do we get them into that, in that mindset?
A little bit of deprogramming, what we hear about, not that everything's wrong, but does it pertain to that person's situation? So my advice to individuals are different across the board. It just really depends on their situation. With that young gentleman, I explained, what's the hurry? You're 26. Why are you putting all your money into your credit cards? I mean, into your 401k. I love using one example, especially around the thinking that I'm going to use my tax returns to pay off my credit card debt every year. Right? There's a lot of people that's a strategy, and it may be a good strategy, but look at your 1031 credit card statements. Go to the last page, it's buried, and see how much you just spent in interest alone. And is that really the best strategy? Or switch it and have more money coming out during the year, pay less to the IRS during the year, because that's what they're taking away, and have more income, right? So it's just people are like, no one told me that, right?
You're giving an interest-free loan to the government and paying interest to credit card companies for it. Like that's you know, but once you break that down, people are like, oh, and oh my gosh, interest rates on credit cards these days. I mean, I can't even, like, it's shocking and not where you want your money to go. I spend a lot of time working with people on that, and particularly going through a divorce where at times you kind of have to go into sometimes a little bit of debt because there's a timing difference on assets settling or things happening, or, you know, it's terrible. And it's a cost of going through the divorce, unfortunately. But we have to look at those things.
Yeah, negotiating with credit cards. I think where I always start is the basics, right? Sometimes the basics, you know, they say it works so well, you stop doing it. So going back to, before we look at buying Amazon or Apple stocks, let's make sure you have a 6-month emergency reserve. And then that's, first of all, what is 6 months? What does 1 month represent? Getting clear what a discretionary and non-discretionary expense is. Most people think Spotify is a non-discretionary expense. No.
I think you and I have had this conversation where, particularly going through divorce, there is a need to still have something that you feel good about or taken care of by or a little bit spoiled by, or whether that's the ability to go out and have wine with girlfriends, or to keep your housekeeper, or to have your eyelashes. I had a client that was her non-negotiable with me. Like when we were building her spending plan, just to get her through, she was like, I'm not giving those up. And she's like, she was like, I'll give up, food, like organic food and all these other things that were high expense items in her budget. And she's like, I'll give all of that up, but I'm not giving up my eyelashes. I was like, all right, okay, let's see. Okay, let's start there, see if we can make it all work, because those aren't cheap. But it's, it is interesting to figure out those nuances in someone's plan that are important, or quote unquote important, or discretionary or non-discretionary, to your point.
Lila, going back to what you had mentioned, I always let people know I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money. All I do is produce awareness and show you where your money's going. And then there's two things that I'm certain about, and I let people know. You have a choice. You can spend less or make more money. Those are your options, right? So I believe in reaping the fruits of our hard labor. So I'm a huge fan of lifestyle, but I also have clarity on how much is going to go towards that lifestyle every year, right? So everyone needs to constitute what is their holy cow. Like, I've got a great friend who was a planning client at first, and she doesn't have children, so she's a horse. She spends $30,000 a year on a horse, and there's no way I'm going to tell her she can't do that, right? So we budget the horse in. So that's kind of the beginning, just starting to realize, oh, wow, I didn't know I was spending that much on lashes. And if they say, nope, I'm keeping my lashes, great. So then that's going in the budget. I do get every individual into a position to save 20% of their income. Before it used to be 10. I think that's not enough unless you plan on living a lesser lifestyle when you do decide to stop working at some point. And it is always 6 months of emergency reserve. And I would always use, what if the situation of a recession came up? Well, I never thought of a pandemic, right? And we're now going into 7 months. So I may change my philosophy to a year worth of liquidity. I'm not sure yet. So just reprogramming clients to think about certain things that they don't think about, or they're not clear. And really there isn't too many tools out there that will do that. I mean, even for the younger generation, right? Our millenniums, they have Acorn. So their extra savings or spending automatically gets invested, right? There's a taxable transaction if you need access to that money, whether it's a loss or a gain. So I will always have clients in a situation, and I have a process to show them, this is what's coming in, this is what's going out, this is what needs to get set aside for a reserve. And once you have your reserve, let's talk about building wealth, right? Getting organized. There's so many other areas that I work with clients. And then again, it just depends on what their situation is. The one thing though, I've seen a bit of a trend in the past few years where women are actually more involved in the financial situations of their household or their own individual plan. I love working with women. When I first started, it really was more of the husbands that were taking the lead. In fact, I would be introduced to a couple, but only the husband would attend the meeting. He was vetting me out, which I let him know, you both have to be present. He can take the finances, but it's important that your wife is clear on what's going on. What did you do? Where's the money at? Right.
I love that. I spend a lot of time talking to people about that and doing chats about, do you know how much money you as a family have in retirement? Do you know how much money you have in college savings? Do you know what the passwords are. To your point earlier, all of the things coming in digitally, like there's only one email account assigned to that. Like that also scares me. Like if something happened to, to your spouse, it's important. And we are all busy. And I want to relieve a little bit of the guilt, because I think there can be a lot of shame around when people are going through divorce, where they're like, I was totally clueless. I have no idea. Like I signed the tax returns on the day they were due. They were just shoved in front of me. I had no idea what my tax return said. No idea how much money we made. No idea where anything is. Like, I mean, and and I can see the emotion and the embarrassment. And I want to tell you, to anyone who's listening, it's very, very common. And in this day and age, I mean, we are so busy, like it's okay to delegate out, but maybe have quarterly meetings or monthly meetings where you kind of sit down and review things. And not that you're planning on maybe getting divorced. I mean, in this community, probably you are, but if something happens, someone's out of commission for a bit of time and you need to keep the household running. People are like, I don't even know how to pay the bills. I've actually gotten some people referred to me who are sudden widowers, because it's the same kind of transitionist work, a little less complicated because it's one person just keeping everything generally, but settling an estate, etc. So I want to take some of the shame away from that, because it's not, it still is kind of common to have the day-to-day operations run by one person, because it's hard to coordinate, like, oh, I'm going to take care of this, you're going to take care of that.
It's hard to coordinate it. It's also, like we talked about earlier, it's a bit of a taboo to talk about finances, right? Also, you're afraid because you don't want to make the other person feel like you don't trust them. And I find this a lot too. And I tell my clients, you were in love. You're in love. You don't think about any of that. You don't think about the divorce, and you clearly don't think that the other person wouldn't be looking after you. So if you're finding yourself in that situation and you've abdicated all of that, it's not because you're weaker or you don't know better. It's because there's only so much you can do. In any business, I mean, for example, Heather and I, we don't do the same thing all the time. She needs to do one thing, I need to do another. And then we come together and we'll do things together, right? And that's the same as any institution. It can't work that everybody's doing the same thing. But the knowledge, yes. I mean, they'll learn, unfortunately, a lot of our clients will learn out of experience, but we are hoping that people who are in a situation that they're going to get married, and even married for the second time, that they remember that it is okay to have these conversations. And if these conversations lead to something different or a pushback, then that highlights red flags. That, it should be very fun. And to Heather's point earlier, it's not that you have to know every day-to-day operations, but it is a conversation that every other month, maybe, that, okay, where are we at? What's going on with the finances? Are we staying on track? Is there something I can do, in that kind of,
well, and money issues are one of the number one causes of divorce. I mean, let's also highlight that part. Like, the reality is one person's a spender, one's a saver. One person, there's, one of the interesting things that I'm seeing more articles about recently is financial control abuse. And, one person really controlling it all and being like, you have to ask that person to do any of your spending or anything. So, and people are talking about things more, to your point, Elaine, I think I am starting to have more and more conversations, and even with younger generation people, that money conversations are coming to the forefront earlier than I think, of people my age. So, and I think that is very powerful and something that we need to break down, even, for those of us going into second marriages, in our world. So I think that's important. And so I'd be curious to see or hear also how you talk to people who have gone through a divorce and are going into, a secondary relationship, who you have them as a client, and then, they're coming to you and going, all right, what do I need to do? Like, do you have some advice for some transition, related things? I think more and more we're realizing, we were having this conversation with an attorney the other day, that we aren't meant maybe to stay with someone from 16 to 90. We're living longer lives. It's becoming kind of more natural and understood that, we're going to have maybe a couple of partners in life. And, and those are transitions that happen.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I will always advise if there's a concern with commingling assets, or should I do a prenup? How will that affect my, going into the marriage? You're already preparing for the divorce with a prenup, or is it better to get a postnup? I always just advise them to speak to a family law attorney.
Mm.
You can keep property separate as long as you never commingle it. That's one thing, but it shouldn't be a deal breaker, right? It shouldn't cause that much problems, especially if the person you're going into your relationship with have the same fundamental values as you do. So try to, mirror something that's definitely, and yes, even in marriages, pre-divorce, those are the conversations that I'm almost a marriage counselor when I'm speaking to some of my clients. I mean, they're really going at it about financial situations. And these were the conversations they didn't have or addressed before they got married.
Mm.
So I always recommend, throw this on the table, make sure you guys are clear, because this little tiny thing is probably what's going to divorce you in the future. Right.
Right. No, I can see that. Like people are like, oh, I really want experiences and I want to go on vacations. And someone else is like, I believe in real estate and I want to invest in properties.
Mhm.
And those budgets, are going to come in conflict for most American families, because you just don't have the extra income to do both of those strategies in life, or lifestyles, right? Those are two different lifestyles. So, I mean, I think they are important conversations. And I think one of the things I would love to help figure out in the world is how do we change that prenup idea into not being that you're planning for divorce conversation. Like there is a terrible connotation around it, but I do think it really brings up, and particularly as you get older, and like I have 2 kids, my significant other has 2 kids. We have different assets that we bring to the table and different plans for our kids' futures. And while we want to grow something also together, we have to sort of plan for these other legs of the stool that we have in our lives. And I think, and they're hard conversations. I've had them. They're difficult, but so important.
Mhm. Yeah, and if it's
Helped by a financial advisor. I mean, this is where you sit down and because you're so great at doing that long-term strategy, like looking at someone and you're like, okay, you have these kids or you have this situation and you have this, like, let's figure out how to manage that collective portfolio, the individual part of it, and then the collective part of it. I think,
yeah, and there's a way. I mean, again, I just bring the conversation to the table, and it's a safe conversation because I don't have an opinion in their situation. All I do is address and have them do some thinking. Like, when we meet next time, let's figure out what you both decide you're going to move forward with. Go have a glass of wine, go, do this, go on a date, and just figure out, like, in a perfect scenario, what would you like to have happen? And that's when it's not as threatening. Like, why are you asking me this question? Right. So just having the conversation out of love, care, and more of an analytic, we've got to address this, just like we have to address estate planning, right? We don't plan on dying, but I have the plans in place, or life insurance, right? How much do we need? Don't plan on knocking you off, but you just have to have this morbid conversation once, put it in place, and then you don't have to deal with it again. Just maybe go into it with the mindset that it's part of the plan.
I have a question. It's really loud over here. That's why I'm putting myself on mute. But I wanted to that. And I think for someone like me, I mean, Heather is very well versed in all the things that you would need. And I also moved back to America after not living here about for 20 years, and things operate very differently abroad than they do here. So it would be really good for the audience to know, what are the things that they do need to think about? Okay. And there's a list, especially for people who are coming out that have abdicated all of their, the insurance and this and that to their partner. or anyone who's starting or thinking about getting married, even for instance, what are the things that they do need to think about that are the non-negotiables that they should really be planning for in the future? I mean, you mentioned the estate planning. That is probably not the essential, but there's the other things that the insurance is, the health, not the health insurance, the life insurance. What are some of the other things that you think are quite important for people to consider and do?
I really like to help people worry in order, right? Before you start getting all this, let's kind of take a step back. So some of the fundamental basics is 6 months emergency reserve. Right? That's something they have to put in place, and probably even before they are able to put that together, they have to figure out what their burn rate is. So a budget, believe it or not, a budget, making sure they're paying themselves first before anyone else, before the credit cards, before the department stores, before anyone. That's where they really have to focus on savings. Other things that you would consider, especially now in days, a health directive. What if you get sick? Power of attorney, if you're now divorced, your spouse isn't going to be the one that can just come in and take care of your finances, right? So thinking about a person who you can trust that is going to pay your rent, mortgage, daycare if you're not able to. So those are just, even before a will, even before a living trust, those are some of the fundamentals that you really should have in place. With respect to of course, we all have to keep auto insurance and things like that. So making sure you have, if you're renting, renter's insurance. We learned this here in the North Bay of California. There were a lot of people that were underinsured, like they didn't have their personal content covered. So having a conversation with your property and casualty agent, which is, I think, one of the biggest flaws of the either robo-advisor or the online, they're not going to advise you on these things. Like if I were to turn your house upside down, shake, and everything falls out, what is it going to cost to replace everything? And you'd probably have to go get it brand new, right? So do some thinking around that. Getting a clear picture. I know people think about long-term planning, but let's just do like 1 to 3 years. What do you want to have happen, right? How much money do you want to have in the bank? What is, do you want to start a 529 plan for your children? What are some of the fundamentals, especially just out of a divorce? It is so devastating. You can't even think about that stuff. And then sometimes they put too much thought into it where it's analysis paralysis. They can't even, their biggest concern is, unfortunately, I see some men and women, and I'm dealing more with same-sex couple divorces, right? Where they're fighting over the kids. Well, wait, no, I actually gave birth. So there's some control on that as well. Just trying to get them to take action on something. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It's just do something, start. You can always go back and change it, right? So
Everything's a living, breathing document.
Yes.
Yeah. You talk about setting a budget. Well, by the way, you need to revisit your budget and make sure that like it was tuned up and that you're actually staying within it, or maybe some of your categories were off. And it's not a monthly budget because there's so many lumpy expenses. So I spend a lot of time digging into people's very detailed lives, and you always have to think of like tires or property taxes if you don't have impounds. Different insurances hit at different times. There's all these, or birthdays, holidays, travel, all of that it's not a monthly increment, but you have to build in some monthly, so you kind of have your savings goes up and then it goes down as you have to spend that money. So there's a dance that happens, and it's not a linear or even a diagonal upward line. There is a life to it that people need to remember.
Yeah. It's always going to revolve. You're going to you might change jobs, you might change locations, you might change countries where you're living. So it's always going to be revolving. The goal is at least start, And, if you go off budget, then maybe you just change it a bit, make some room for those unpredictable expenses. It's okay. You got your entire life to figure it out, right? So I think that's one of the biggest areas. If I can get a client to take action, that's a plus.
What is a good tool on the back end? I know you mentioned some of the tools that you use, but so let's say that you haven't budgeted, you don't understand that, you haven't even been privy to any of this and how to do that, and you've just been spending without really thinking. Okay, so there's a mindset shift. But then how do you start? Like, where do you, besides looking at your bank statements, which is, I think a lot of people are fearful to look at it. I mean, there are moments I'm even hesitant to be like, oh no, I got to go in there and pay this thing, and no, I'm going to have to see what's in my account. I mean, there is that fear that you know, we all go through those moments. So sorry, it's so loud here, but yeah.
So there's a lot of tools that will a lot of apps that will aggregate all of your accounts. You can link them, they're safe. Basically, you can't transact with these apps. All it does is download data. At the moment, I can't think of any, but I will.
So I put most of my clients onto Mint, and it's free. You get a monthly credit score. I spend a lot of time because to exactly what you said earlier, you don't have to be hitting it out of the park on all of these areas. If you just do, a little bit at a time, by the way, you're super empowered. It actually energizes you. I become a nerd around finances, but I see a lot of my clients doing that as well. So I had a client send me her report yesterday, and she's like, look, I'm up, like my credit report is up by this much. And, and we celebrate those moments, but Mint is great because it will, they advertise a bit to you. I ignore it. I use it for myself, but you can set, if for some reason, like, oh, I got charged a late fee the other day, and I was like, this is on auto-pay. How the heck did I get a late fee from this company? So I called them and I'm like, you're ridiculous. And that would have A, dinged my credit, B, would have been charged, whatever, $25. Big deal. I mean, that is a big deal.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. And then it will tell you like, oh, you just spent more than usual on, I think like kids activities or something last month. And I was like, oh, my daughter's competition fees. But it hit my radar that I was like, oh, what was that ran through my account? Because to your point earlier about the statements, I'm not the most amazing person at looking at my personal statements. But Mint is really easy to set up. It'll aggregate all your things. It tracks net worth to the extent that you put everything in there. And it's free. I mean, and it's just a place to start, and it will start getting some intelligence around it. It's run by Quicken, so it's a trusted trusted financial institution. So it's not, there's a part of me that worries always a little bit about some of the more up and coming apps that are trying to do things, but that is one of my just favorite. It's just easy.
Yeah, I have a system that integrates Mint to it, so it's the most easiest. I'm conceptual, so I just like to look at things. And to your point, there are a lot of people. They just don't want to look at their situation, right? It's kind of like they put their head in the sand, and they figured if they don't see where they're at, they don't have to really worry about it. But everyone who goes through an exercise, I'll have them do their own, just throw together what you think you spent per month, right? And there is no judgment when it comes to me. I've seen it all, right? So they'll put all these things, they'll list all of these items, and then I will have them connect to Mint after, right? So they're going to do their budget first, and then we're going to see their actual budget. And they're always floored, and they're afraid to do it. I love it. I love seeing the reaction really at the end of the day. And I always help clients get rid of debt. That isn't the issue, but that is a Band-Aid. They first have to figure out how it occurred, how it accumulated. And that's where those programs will really bring awareness. And yes, institutions do it all the time. $35 late charge. What are you talking about? Oh, we're sorry. And they'll correct
it back, but
yeah. And how many times per year does that happen per credit card or bank or whatever it is? So it's really.
And Mint, I got my, they said, hey, do you want to see your subscription fees? And
Oh,
they accumulated them across the credit cards that I have them on for both my business and my personal, and just the auto withdrawals that hit PayPal, actually, because I linked my PayPal up there. And I was like, I went in last night and canceled 6 of them. So to your point, that's a real secret spot that, oh, I don't listen to 5 different versions of music. I don't need 5 subscriptions for music services.
yeah. Try this free for 30 days and you just forget about it. And now they're even being more strategic. They'll charge you for the year. So chances are you won't catch it if it's a yearly charge.
Renewals, yeah. It's happened to me many times.
Me too.
For Lila, because you do get a discount. You're like, oh, it's going to save us a little money right now. I'm going to put that in there.
Yeah, mine was
it's reminding me of something that I find really interesting, because of course we talked about this, but we already go into life with an idea about how to view finances and money, right? Through our families, how do they operate? So we either go against the grain, or we kind of are like our parents, right? Or like the parents, our grandparents, whatever it is, generation, we see it happen. Well, I remember my dad and mom were so different, right, in their financials. And my mom, because, she's Italian and she lived through the war, she was very frugal, and she is very frugal. But I remember it's like she would never, at a restaurant, she would never take face value what they charge us. She would always look at the bill, line by line. Oh, no, they charged us for this. We didn't have this. Now, it's interesting because I never do that. I don't know if it's because I go against it. So it's to that same idea, what we're saying. Like sometimes like, I don't want to know. It's like, why do I have to go through all of that? I'd rather not know. I'd rather trust. I'd rather do this. I don't know what the mindset behind it is. And my dad's the same. My dad never does check the bill. My mother always would do it. And it was always a fight between them. So he's like, you don't need to check it. It's fine. He's always found something wrong with it. But it's the same with what we're talking about. It's like, we almost just don't want, it's a very interesting psyche that we have, that we're like, yeah, no, let's just trust the process. And let's just, we don't want to know where we're spending the money. It's an easier thing not to know. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I also found once my clients go through that exercise, once they get rid of debt, once they have the reserve, they're always on their finances. And
you never want to go back to being, I remember I got into credit card debt at the end of college for a variety of reasons, medical debt, a bunch of things. And I fought my way out of it for like 3 years. I have never had credit card debt since. I am like scared, like it's very scary to me. And to my point earlier, I look at the interest rates and I'm like, I don't really want to spend my money there. But it's it's a fearful place to be from. And so I think you do get empowered when you get that, control back, and
you're not scared of it anymore. And you're not scared of it anymore. It's one of those things. It's like going into the unknown of, oh my God, what does that mean that I have to actually be on top of everything? And then once you're there, you're like, oh, actually, this is way better to know.
And it doesn't take that long to get out of it. And I think that's where I try to get the word out. If I can help a person, they don't actually have to use me for their investments, but just the one thing I can see on my clients' faces once they clean out debt is, I wish I would have done this sooner, but there's this shame. They're like embarrassed. They're like, I got all this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, we'll get rid of it. That's not the problem, right? And then again, once they nail it and they're building wealth and they have savings and they're doing all this stuff that, they're actually showing some progress for their hard work that they're doing. They just, it's a different mindset and they just are on it, right? So, and Heather, like you, they're like, no way, like there's
never again. On it, like I see it in, again, with people going through divorce, because honestly, a lot of times there is a dip and then you have to dig yourself back out. You have to adjust lifestyle and you realize you're going to be okay. Like there's the whole adage of money doesn't buy happiness. But there's some necessity level, right? Like the want and need dance, but you start figuring out that you are going to be okay. It wasn't, this brand of something that bought you happiness. It was, there's something else built into it. So there's all of that. But Oh my gosh, we could go on for a long time. I want to see if there's any questions out there from the couple of people that are out there. And then I would like to circle back to the beginning of our conversation about how someone finds a resource like you. We'll put your contact information here. And are you someone that can work across the country? Are you, so you are licensed, anyone can work with you from anywhere?
Yes.
And as we all understand, everything is virtual these days. I've probably made it even better. So we'll get Elaine's contact information into our chat.
Elaine was introduced to me by a friend of mine who lives in Florida, and I know that she works with him very closely. And so, yes, she can work across America, which is great.
So good. And then if there are any questions from our attendees, I'm not seeing anything so far in our Q&A.
So yeah, what is the best way to find
you?
We'll put your details, but also just to think about that, because like I said before, a lot of people have this misconception, oh, if I don't have enough money, I can't even call. But there is a difference between a financial investor and a financial advisor. So what should they be looking for?
I try not to advise people, look at a person who looks to have their financial situation intact, because a lot of those individuals are maxed out on their credit cards as well. So I would, there's great resources like this group, right? Ask questions. For me, I won't necessarily Yelp an individual. I'll just throw it out to the community and say, does anyone have a good recommendation for this, right?
And to your point earlier, asking a friend. I mean, I know that that's a little bit taboo, but I would be happy to be like, hey, who are you using? Like what,
Do you have someone? Can you tell me a little bit about the areas that they helped you with? Whenever I'm introduced by a friend, I will always ask that client, what was it that this person shared with you that has us speaking together? Because clearly there was something that was relevant, right? And so I also will, I had met with a person who was introduced to me a couple of months ago. She is going through a divorce, and she had to make a decision if she should sell her house or all of these financial questions. And honestly, I recommended her to go talk to Lila. I said, I don't think you're in a position yet to make financial decisions. There's a lot of emotional stuff going on there, right? So sometimes just to take care of the person, take a minute. You have plenty of time. There's no rush, right? So,
oh gosh, yeah.
It is exactly why I went and got my divorce coaching accreditation. I was spending a lot of time within my divorce clients having really emotional conversations and going, okay, let's just table this for a minute. Like, let's not get into the numbers side of it. Let's figure out where the emotional channels are. And then let's see if we can make the numbers make sense. And if they can't, let's make a different path forward and work through that.
Yeah. If you're going to be working with a planner, this is, we're not married, but it is a relationship. There has to be trust, right? Yeah. So that's first and foremost, figure out how they're going to get compensated, know what's on the table.
What are the common fees that are out there for our audience? What fee structures?
Mm-hmm. There's fee-based, there's commission, there's consulting, there is
consulting would be like an hourly rate. Like, I just want to come and talk to you about, like, just put a plan together for me. We're not going to keep, updating it, but it's just a single time type of thing.
Yes. And okay. That person's going to say, based on what it is your objectives are, what are you trying to do here? They'll put together recommendations. And that's just kind of like a transactional way to go. And some people want that. Some people just want investment advisors, like a stockbroker, right? I'll let them know, E-Trade's a great resource if you just want to purchase stock, right? You really don't need a stockbroker. It's so much cheaper to go to these venues. There are financial advisors. There are financial planners, those individuals, if you want to have a more ongoing relationship where they're going to check in once a year. My clients call me for everything. We're thinking of buying a car. Cool. What kind are you going to get? Right? Like they don't have my permission, but sometimes it's, well, there's this deal, there's this deal. Should we just pay cash? Should we finance? What are some recommendations? Or, they're calling me to say, should I refinance? Well, what's your interest rate? Absolutely, definitely do that. You'd probably lower your mortgage by $600 a month. So they just want that individual who they can kind of bounce things off, whatever the situation is, right?
And it's
So
the person that's not emotionally tied to whatever is going. I mean, and again, it's not talking to your, mother, brother, best friend, whatever. It's going in and having a conversation with someone who's a bit, 1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
Who's still tied to you, but is just outside the doors.
Yeah, the individual Lella had mentioned, I mean, talk about deprogramming. He's, very set in his ways. And he'll call me because I know what you're going to tell me, but I want to ask you this anyways.
Uh-huh.
It's one of those questions. I'm like, okay, so, okay. And then, I'll sometimes agree with
reassurance. It's the reassurance, but it is an interesting thing. Also, you are well versed. I mean, it's not that you're calling your dad or your mom or somebody, who might not really be well versed. I mean, you particularly, especially have a background in the mortgages and that industry. So you understand that. And I will tell you that most of our clients have not gotten their own mortgage, have not bought their own house, to date. And it is very daunting and very scary, right? I mean, you're taking out a loan, you're doing this, you're trying to get credit, you're trying to do that. I mean, how to even get a mortgage? Like, what do I need to even do that? I don't even have that much credit. Or in some cases, their ex has destroyed their credit.
Mhm.
So they got to rebuild it. And it's like, even that. So it is such a big process to even get there.
Which has no credit. I had a client yesterday. She, by the way, is the major breadwinner. She is the one that actually earned all the money, and all the credit was under him. Off of her. I mean, it was their community income, really, but it was, so I looked at her and I was like, run me a credit report. And he had dinged, so she had crappy credit because she had no credit utilization. So one of the things to know out there is you do actually need to use your credit cards to build your credit. Yeah. You can't just have credit cards and never use them. That will detriment you. There's a percentage of utilization that they want to see that you have the capability of building something up and paying it down, to build that, and to also build the dollar value of her credit, of anyone's credit. I mean, I think she got a credit card, let's pretend it was $5,000 to $7,000, and she makes hundreds of thousands. So, but she doesn't qualify.
Yeah, and you get points, and you could buy stuff for free
and percentage back. I'm actually switching mine because I'm like, I can't travel. My mileage cards aren't that interesting for me anymore.
And yeah, dining out, Amazon Prime. I mean, I'm sure everyone's getting those cards.
Right? Oh, maybe that's what I should switch to.
Yeah, no, and I recommend utilizing your credit cards as long as you can pay everything off at the end
every month.
Right. So those are just the standard guidelines. Some people like having a balance. I'm like, how come? Like, again, it's that mindset. Where's your thinking around that? Because you're earning 0% in your checking account, but you're getting charged 29% here. Right. They pay it. They just, so deprogramming. Yeah.
Well, this has been great, Elaine, honestly. I mean, I can put a hand over my heart. You helped me tremendously, especially when I moved back to America and I had no credit. Forget about bad credit. I had zero credit in America. And that's something to be said again, in different countries, they don't accept credit from other countries. Mm-hmm. So even though I had great credit in the UK, I didn't have credit here. So it's like starting from scratch again. And you really helped me through that whole process of relearning American ways. So I thank you for that. And what is the best way for people to find you and reach out to you? We will put it in our show notes, but it would be your
email address, which is eellis@pacificadvisors.com. My website is elainellis.com. I'm www, and most likely on the video chat. But if somebody has a question, I'm happy to answer. And one thing about the Split.fyi venue that you've both created is huge. I mean, I was young. My friends were getting married. They weren't getting divorced. I had no resources on how to figure this out on my own. So as more women are starting to lean in and be involved, some are actually taking over their finances for both spouses or taking the initiative. Having more resources like this is huge. Just being able to, I'm going through this right now, guys, just having someone who can virtually reach out because they know what they're going through. Like I couldn't pay for that in the past. So I'm spreading this word out that, you're not the only one. Don't be embarrassed and don't worry, you're gonna be okay. That's really huge.
That's the key.
Yeah.
That's the best note to end on. You're going to be okay. I love it.
Thank you so much, Elaine. This was
Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome, ladies. Thank you.
All right.
a
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.